Wow, what an incredible day. I don't live here anymore. I live 8,000 miles away, and when I'm here, I feel the way that only I could communicate to my 6-year-olds when I taught them, which was, I'm growing my brain. When I'm on the campus, I always feel enriched, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with you today. I graduated from William&Mary in May 2010. I was a double major in government and Middle Eastern studies, and William&Mary assured me that a liberal arts education means you learn how to think, not what to think. So I'm going to speak to you about education reform today, which was not part of my major, but is a passion and a purpose in my life now. When I graduated, I drove my Ford Focus from Richmond, Virginia, where my family lived, to San Jose, California. It was a harrowing 56-hour, 5-day journey by myself. And when I arrived in San Jose, California, I joined Teach for America, which is an important organization in American education reform committed to the idea that we can, in fact, provide equitable education for every student in the United States. And I was placed in Rocket Ship, which is a charter network in San Jose, California, a brilliant organization which serves underserved communities in Silicon Valley and beginning next year in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and after that in Tennessee, and after that in DC. It has a vision for change in America. But my students, all 93 of them who I taught for 2 years, were students, 90% of whom qualified for free and reduced lunch, meaning that for a family of 4, they made $30,000 a year or less. And 75% of my students were English language learners, meaning that their second language was English. The language that they would be required to learn in would be a language that they had only learned by the age of 6 when I first met them. They spoke Spanish, most of them. They were the children of immigrants from Mexico, and they became my family over the course of those years. Now, to put it into context, the achievement gap in San Jose looks a little bit like this. There are standardized state tests every single year, and in 2011, white students in San Jose passed at a 74% proficiency. 74% of white students in San Jose were proficient on their tests, and only 29% of students of Hispanic origin were. That's an almost 50-point gap explained clearly by demographics, by the idea that zip code determines destiny and that my students were doomed from the start. And it's ridiculous. And you should turn to your neighbor and you should say, this is wrong, right? Turn to them now and say, this is wrong. And you're so right. You're totally right. It's completely wrong, and it's outrageous, and it enrages me. But when I left them in 2012, 90% of my 93 students had passed their math tests. And I saw them last week, and they talked to me about all manner of interesting topics, some of which were very inappropriate, and I was concerned. However, I got to do math with them, and they still love math, and they're good at it, and they know they're good at it, which is very important. So I moved to Johannesburg, South Africa in August, and I moved to become the Director of Development and Leadership for eAdvance, which is a South African education company dedicated to leading systemic change in South Africa. And it's really important that our mission is worded this way because it's not an achievement gap, so to speak, in South Africa. It's just a lack of achievement. The World Economic Forum put out a study about these little ones, and that study said that South Africa ranks 140 out of 144 countries surveyed for quality of primary education. And it also said that South Africa ranks 143 out of 144 countries for maths and science education. And then it made the astute observation that perhaps this was the reason for economic stagnancy in South Africa. And I thought, that makes sense to me. Does it make sense to anyone else? And so with that in mind, I started reading about innovation, whatever that means. I'm going to define it myself. Speakers have been defining it all day based on their own disciplines, but innovation appears to be the source for economic growth globally if we do it right. And my question here today, and the reason I'm grateful the committee brought me, is because here in the last 20 minutes of our time together, I just want to throw a wrench in everything we've been doing today. Yeah, you're welcome. I want actually to just quash this celebration of innovation and to say that in fact innovation is probably a privilege of the middle upper class. I want to say to you that I think that my low-income students aren't being equipped or prepared to be the innovators that we need them to be to solve the problems that are important to improving their communities. Low-income students, or in the case of South Africa, low-income countries are not equipping their students to innovate. So, there's why. There is a theory that says that practice is important to becoming an expert. And that theory began with Anders Ericsson and his research, and then it was popularized by Malcolm Gladwell, and I see you shaking your head. You read Outliers probably. And then Macklemore, who is an up-and-coming hip-hop artist from Seattle. I know. His opening song on his album, which no one is getting to because they're busy listening to music about thrift shopping, is it's entitled 10,000 Hours. And it's about this theory that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert in your field. And he writes this: the greats weren't great because at birth they could paint. The greats were great because they paint a lot. And there are several case studies out there that prove this point, but my point is that low-income students in the United States and low-income countries in the world aren't having the opportunity to paint a lot, whatever that painting is for them. My supposition is, in fact, if we believe innovation is key to economic growth, and I believe that we do, then we should be concerned with who's doing the innovating. And we should deliberately be equipping them with the skills they need, the time, the training, the resources, both financial and human, and also the practice that it takes to be a good innovator who creates solutions that actually stick and matter for the communities. So I want to talk quickly about my definition of innovation. For me, innovation is creativity, which is channeled practically and effectively into solutions that last. And if creativity matters, then we should be terrified, because studies show that creativity actually falls as you get older. Ken Robinson has this excellent talk, which you should look up after this, where he says schools kill creativity. There are various studies, one of which researchers tested 1,500 5-year-olds, and they actually found that while 98% of them tested at genius level on divergent thinking tests at the age of 5, when they were retested at age 15, only 12% of them could pass these tests in divergent thinking. And so, with all of that said, there are easy and effective ways that educators can be facilitating divergent thinking in their classrooms, as well as structured innovation that leads to change in our communities. If we put legs on this, I think it really sifts out in 4 ways. We teach students to see, we teach them to speak, we teach them to solve, and we teach them to serve others. To begin with seeing, the process of innovation begins with the recognition of a problem, but I think more broadly, the recognition of a pattern. And when a student can say, I see a pattern and I either seek to continue it or I seek to change it, then they have become empowered in their own way. A lot of educators will talk about implementation as the space in which a student becomes a confident learner, or in fact, a confident person. But I actually think that confidence is born out of the C stage. I think that confidence is born when a child who has never before recognized a pattern recognizes a pattern and then says, I'm capable, I have the capacity, and I also have the responsibility to move forward from here. So in my classroom, we focused a lot on seeing. We talked about things like which 2 governments were debating the height of of Mount Everest, and why did it matter, right? And we talked about it in the context of place value. So we were talking about real world things, and we were putting hands and feet on the topics we were talking about in our classroom. Second, I think it's about speaking. And I believe in students using their own vernacular, using their own language in the classroom, and I believe in the power of slang, because quite frankly, slang helps us communicate effectively with each other. So what I'm talking about here is speaking as a way to communicate students' ideas to one another effectively, to me effectively, to other adults in their life, to people that they Skype with, whomever it may be. I'm talking about speaking in a way that belies how intelligent we are and know ourselves to be. And there is an educator named Doug Lemov. He's the managing director of the Uncommon Schools, which are a network of excellent charter schools in the Northeast. And he says that the complete sentence is the battering ram that knocks down the door to college. I don't think it's just the battering ram that knocks down the door to college. The battering ram is what knocks down the door between you all when you speak at your breaks, and it's the battering ram that knocks down the door between my students being considered less than and being considered professionals in a workplace. And when you teach English language learners, you take responsibility as an educator to provide them with the opportunity to speak in complete sentences, to ask each other questions, and to believe that their peers are intelligent and worthwhile resources for them to consult. So we talked a lot in my class, and sometimes that was confusing for the people who coached and observed me. Because we weren't practicing math all the time. But we were practicing how to speak to one another, and I believed and continue to believe that that's very important. Then we solved our problems. A short story. This young man, this young gentleman on the left is Brian. Brian had a difficult time controlling his impulses, to put it mildly, in my classroom. I taught him for 2 years. I sought a way to channel his energy, his enthusiasm, and his downright intelligence into our classroom in a practical and in a positive way. And I only discovered it at the end of my first year with him, but I was fortunate to teach him for 2 years. Brian is an unbelievable instructor of other children. So Marlene on the right had a really difficult time learning to round numbers, 3-digit numbers, but rounding to the tens place. We started learning that in April of their 2nd grade year, which put them far ahead of their peers, and she struggled with it. And Brian taught her, and he taught her better than I taught her. And from then on, Marlene knew to consult Brian, and Brian knew that he was a respected and an important individual. So when students solved problems in my classroom, I wanted to encourage affirmation of all kinds. I wanted them to know that they were loved and cared about, and that failure is what it is. It's just an opportunity to grow. A thing about solving in a classroom is that teachers are scared of it. Especially if you bring a big problem into your classroom, it gets really messy because kids, when they solve things, they play at its core. And I don't know how many of you have been around 5-, 6-, and 7-year-olds recently, but they are gross. They are super messy. They leak fluids of all kinds. And when you let them solve in your classroom, it means you need to let up a little bit of your control. And most of you who remember your elementary school teachers or who know me know that control is a difficult thing for me to get rid of. But solving in my classroom meant trust and affirmation above all else. And finally, we have this serve piece, which I would never have been able to articulate and wouldn't love as much without William and Mary, which taught me that when you serve others, you guarantee that the innovation that you bring to a project is done out of love, right? And love guarantees that innovation is never self-serving. So here are my students. It's difficult to find me because I'm vertically challenged. They're 7 years old, literally, in that picture. And we spoke all the time and continue to talk now about what it means to be good to other people, good and kind. And I don't think that we can ever undervalue goodness and kindness in education. So I learned more from the children and their parents and their community in my time with these students, and I'm learning more in my time in Johannesburg than I could ever sought to have taught. Anyone? And I'm just really grateful. And I hope that innovation leads to gratefulness in your heart too.